Um, so it's a pleasure to be here or there. I'm not sure where I am relative to you, but I can see a bit of the audience, and I gather that you can see me. So I'm very pleased that Robert asked me to speak to you today to talk about work that we're doing here at Georgia Tech in bringing together the physical and the virtual using Second Life. I'm going to try to explain what it is that you see in front of you on the screen now, that is to say the Second Life demonstration, where you see, in fact, two versions of a little block world. In Second Life, a ghostly version with just the outlines of the blocks. And on the screen surrounding the space, you'll see a streaming video of a physical version of those same Lego blocks, but with avatars standing in them from Second Life. And I'm going to try to make clear why that's potentially interesting or different in just a minute. But let me first say that I'm working, I'm speaking to you from the Augmented Environments Lab here at Georgia Tech, whose director is my colleague Blair McIntyre. And Blair and I have been working for about 7 years now on augmented reality experience design using laboratory-grade equipment to mediate augmented reality, and also now moving into mobile technologies. The key in each case in our work has been this goal of bringing together the physical and the virtual. That is to say, augmented reality is all about, in distinction to virtual reality, augmented reality is all about trying to put information or graphics or computer-generated materials into a space with human beings, with physical locations, with social interactions. And what the goals that we've been pursuing with this work have been to do this augmented reality for informal education, cultural events, creative events, and so on. Second Life is an interesting environment for all sorts of reasons for us, but in its basic form, it is a virtual environment and not an augmented environment. That is to say, in Second Life, you enter into a virtual world where you interact with other, where you are represented by an avatar and you interact with other avatars. For those of you who don't know about Second Life, it's a so-called massively multiple online game or online environment in which you can register, create an avatar for yourself that is a character. You can buy land, you can build on your land, creating an environment for yourself. You can visit an enormous array of different kinds of venues that have been created by other people and organizations. But all this, as I say, is wholly virtual. Well, not really wholly virtual, because no successful computer application is entirely virtual, that is entirely locked in cyberspace. There is no matrix. The issue is always how an application, how a computing environment can be used in social or academic or business situations. And Second Life itself is no exception. It is in fact surrounded by other applications like websites and blogs that pull Second Life into the social nexus of our world. It is also a place where concerts are staged or lectures take place in Second Life, which lectures that are streamed into Second Life from the physical world. But while Second Life is always part of the social world, it's not been part of the physical world in the sense that we are now trying to develop. That is to say, what we're working on is to try to juxtapose elements of Second Life with elements of the physical world as represented by live action video. So what you see in the image here in Second Life is a small space. I'm sorry, as Robert referred to, we had hoped to make it larger, but for reasons of the current technology, we've had to keep it rather small. It's a small space in Second Life that is surrounded by video screens. And these video screens are, in fact, streaming a video link from our lab here at Georgia Tech. That camera is pointed at a table. And that table has Lego blocks on it, as you can see, as well as what are called fiducial markers. These fiducial markers are part of, become common in augmented reality applications that allow the camera to register and know its position relative to the coordinate space. So what the fiducial markers allow us to do is to coordinate this little space in Second Life with the space in our lab, with the table. And that means that you can visit this Second Life space, and your avatars can be recorded, and they can be composited into the video stream along with the physical blocks. There's quite a time lag, I'm afraid. It may even be greater that you're coming across the Atlantic, that the signal's going across the Atlantic. So it's about, unfortunately, at this point, a 10-second time lag. If you move your character, you're going to need to wait to see the results of your character moving in the space. Now you'll see those very, very faintly. I'm not sure if they show up on your screen in projection, but very faintly.
Just barely, actually.
Yeah, we have the ghostly shadows of the Lego blocks, and so they actually occlude and are physically their physics participates in the Second Life physics, so you can run into them. And in fact, as you walk around them, if you wait a few seconds for the image to reflect your walking, you'll see that you are occluded by those. In other words, it's as if your avatar were actually in our laboratory walking around on the table. And you'll notice those balls that we have, those balls are virtual objects that are also being composited into the video stream. So you can kick those balls around, someone can try, and you'll see that several seconds later, the ball in the video stream will move too. So what we essentially have then is the first pass at blending the physical and the virtual in Second Life. And in this case, what you're seeing is a blending where the avatars from Second Life can occupy space in a physical environment. We can also do the opposite, but I'm afraid I can't show that to you right now, where we can have human figures, live-action human images, composited into the Second Life background. What we do is we have people stand in front of a green screen, and we can then put that their image, moving image, into any Second Life environment, anywhere in the vast regions of Second Life, so that it looks rather like the weatherman standing in front of the weather map, on television forecasts. So that's the germ of the technology, and obviously a lot more needs to be done. We want to be able to open this up so that we can represent much larger spaces. We want to be able to have ways in which the more objects can be composited into the space. We want to be able to have, obviously we want to be able to have seamless audio going on at the same time, so that you can talk to people in Second Life and you can talk to your, and they can talk to people in the physical space. But if we begin to think about where this technology might go as we develop it, we can see, I think, a number of interesting avenues where it would be useful to blend the physical and the virtual. For example, new possibilities for conferencing and collaborative work. The notion of video conferencing has been around for decades, and with some success and with perhaps always the promise of more than it has managed to deliver. And one of the reasons that video conferencing has not been more successful in replacing face-to-face conferencing is the lack of a sense of shared space. So in a typical video conference, I mean, for example, using Skype, my image is up on a screen, I can see you, but I have no sense that our spaces coincide. We don't, you know, we're in different worlds. With this Second Life, or something like Second Life as a virtual environment, we can imagine the possibility of sharing space. And you could do that with just having your avatars all come and meet in the same place, and that's actually being done in Second Life. But if we have also the ability to use the live video feed, as we do in our special client that we've created, then we can imagine a video, we can imagine a conference in which some of the conferees are in a physical location, others are represented by avatars, but they can all be, as it were, around the same table. And we can imagine, too, the possibility ultimately of sharing a view of objects, like the ball you see in the demonstration here. So that if we were all talking about a product that we were designing, or if we were all talking about the same artifact for educational purposes, we could see that artifact in front of us on the table. So I think that there are a variety of ways in which we could configure this combination of the physical and the virtual for collaborative work. In addition, and extending on that idea, we could think about new formats for informal education and experience design. For example, the ability, giving avatars in Second Life the ability to visit historic locations, a historic home, an archaeological site, a battlefield, the possibility of placing yourself as an avatar within that space so that you'd see the real space on the screen and you'd see your place in it. I think, Robert, you and I have been talking, and I know you've been doing a lot of thinking about the educational opportunities that a really sophisticated form of this technology would make possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you could, you know, I thought, actually, when you said it, you were so eloquent. I'd like to hear you elaborate on it again.
Well, I mean, this technology is, when we first saw it, it's what's kind of ironic is that we first came across this in the very first meeting we had at the beginning of this year. It was one of those things that when everyone saw it, it hit them like a ton of bricks. In fact, I think I don't know if how well you were actually, your perception of yourself, that you're how well known you are, but anybody I mention it to knows you already. I mean, oh, that's the guy who does that. And so, in fact, it's such an impressive technology that it almost precedes you, that people talk about it. This, and also the version of the Wii, the one where you have that perspective, as I believe it is also connected to you and to this technology, if I'm not mistaken. But my ideas about what you could do here are something like how you would marry this in terms of education and the possibilities of overlaying. I mean, you've described a number of them already about the idea of putting people in. What I can see is that this represents a paradigm where, in fact, if you had something like a heads-up display and you had a virtual world, you could overlay it on top of the real world. And by doing that, you could make you could interact with the real world in a way you cannot now. Therefore, you could make the real world essentially much more intelligent than it is right now. And I believe that this is a paradigm not only because it's interesting and it's possible, but also I believe that this is something that will happen, in the sense that when you get things like nanotechnology, when you get much smarter objects, you'll be able to interact with the real world in a much more profound way. And what I like about this technology is because it, in a way, paves the way for how you might want to do that. You can look at it, look around you, and you can anticipate the intelligence of the environment and use the virtual reality and the augmented reality overlay to help acclimatize you to that and figure out ways that you might want to use it before the actual physical world is able to do that. And I see that's, I mean, when I think about it, I'm completely flabbergasted, and you know, there's anywhere I look, I can see the possibility for information transfer and for being able to do things that there's no way that I could do. I almost start to see the environment as being quite stupid, You know, I mean, I look at the door and I think the door doesn't know anything. It can't tell me very much, you know. And I see this as being something that I don't think is really well understood, or maybe hasn't even really crossed most people's minds. But I do believe it's something that's integral, and it is certainly a paradigm for the future. And of course, when the environment is smart, then you can use it to be a lot smarter. You have to depend on your memory a lot less in a way, and can focus more on larger patterns. How you interact with it will be of necessity altered.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you know, not only, obviously the environment needs to get smarter, and we need to make improvements to the technology to facilitate that ability to interact. And what you're looking at here is sort of like the first flight of the Wright brothers airplane compared to what can be done. And in fact, in terms of technological advance, can happen fairly soon. For example, you mentioned the idea of having a head-mounted, you know, a display so that you could actually move around in the space. What you're seeing here is a fixed camera and actually it's a very inexpensive webcam that's doing this, or relatively inexpensive webcam that's doing this video. But in fact, in the lab, we have experimented with using head-mounted displays that are more expensive, which would essentially free you to be the avatar who walks around and changes your point of view in the space, rather than having to see it as in a third-person view, which is what you're seeing now. And so then the kinds of things that Robert's talking about become possible, where if you have a tracking system built into the ceiling of your lab, let's say, and it knows where you are and where you're looking, then you can really immerse yourself in Second Life, and you can really feel that the entire virtual environment is surrounding you. If you then have ways to track the objects that you might want to manipulate, then you can begin to make all sorts of interesting experimental relationships between the virtual objects and the physical ones. And so we're interested in working at all levels of the technology, from things that can be done now with inexpensive webcams and simple tracking mechanisms like these fiducial markers. And let me say parenthetically that this technology is really something that you could imagine doing at home. You know, you can download the client. You could download the client. We haven't. It's not ready for prime time. But ultimately, you would be able to download the client. You would be able to put a little webcam together, put some fiducial marks on the table, and then you could begin to make your own augmented, you know, version of Second Life. But in a few years, the technology in terms of cameras, in terms of tracking, will have advanced to the point where real home applications will be within the realm of, you know, will be affordable. At the same time, the higher end technologies, high-end tracking devices, high-end cameras for resolution and so on, make the other kinds of applications we've been talking about just over the horizon, in terms of, at least in terms of experimental work. And let me just say finally that one of the real interesting opportunities that our system creates and affords already is the opportunity for creative work. We have an undergraduate student in our university who has created a machinima piece using our augmented reality Second Life engine. Everyone knows what machinima is. It's this very interesting popular movie format that has sprung up on the internet, where people use game engines to create their own linear movie pieces. Many of them humorous, some of them short, some of them rather long, some machinima pieces are getting quite elaborate. Our student made what I think has to be one of the most interesting and esoteric pieces. She recreated a futurist film from 1916 in Second Life, so that the passiists were live-action human actors and the futurists were avatars. And she then created a set of intertitles based on the intertitles from the original movie, and she put the whole thing together to look like an old movie, you know, with slow frame rate and with flickering.
Oh, excellent.
Not even, it's an extraordinary piece. I wish I could show it to you, but
Is
it
it
just
not on YouTube? Is there not an example of it?
Actually it should. She's been threatening or promising to put it on YouTube for some time, but I don't think it's up there right now.
Okay. Yep.
If we can show it, if I can get you the URL, I will.
I'd like to.
But it's just one example, and it's not. In that case, what she did could also have been done by After Effects, using compositing. But the problem with that is that it would have taken forever. And I think that this AR Second Life application allows a kind of playful relationship to the technology that's certainly reflected in this film that I think shouldn't be discounted. I think the playful possibilities of creating works that combine the physical and the virtual are really one of the exciting things that we want to foster.
I think it's fantastic. I'm so impressed by your technology. I'm really, and I think many others are as well. I speak for them. I had a question.
Sure.
When do you think that you would actually have like the technology? What's your sort of timescale that you could have a sim up where people could actually come in and play around and video and take a drive off the table in the way like the video that. What kind of time frame are you talking? And you're in this state, but can you give people any kind of idea?
I'm afraid it would be hard to say. We actually had sometime last fall we had a demo that we were streaming into Second Life for a period of about a month, and people could come. It was a camera that was pointed at a corner of our lab. People could come in, and that is to say, avatars could come in and interact with anybody who happened to be passing by in the camera.
Right.
And it was an interesting experiment. It's the sort of thing that we will probably do again, perhaps in the fall. The time frame for getting something that we could make available to to everyone to use, that is to say, the client itself, I'm afraid I can't.
I wasn't thinking even so much of the client. I mean, just an example sim. I mean, now what we've tried, is that it's a little bit small and it's a little bit hard to see, exactly the relationship. I mean, the technology is so impressive; it doesn't really do it justice. So, is there a time when, in fact, there might be in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, where you would actually have something that people could come in and experience on their own?
Okay. To be honest, it would probably be the summer before that could happen, because we have to get we're in a funding cycle. We have to get another graduate student engaged to bring him or her up to speed. And then we could, hopefully over the summer, put together something that would be more permanent and larger, solve some of these registration problems so that we can have the whole table in view, and then give people something they could really play with.
That would be great. Is there, what was I going to ask you? Is there, I'm sure that there, well, I'm not sure. Are there any questions? Does anybody else? We have at least one. Can you do the, there's. One sec. Yeah, I think we got a bunch of questions. I think, again, people are really fascinated. So, okay, Jeroen, he's asking for someone in Second Life, right?
Yes, for Second Life. First,
there's a Second Life question.
Someone in Second Life from Arden Force, he's saying, whoa, a lot.
Someone is saying, whoa, a lot. Whoa. Whoa, I think it's just a comment. Whoa.
Yeah.
Where are they in Second Life that they're saying whoa?
I'm not sure. They just watching the video somewhere.
There are a lot of people here.
Well, I tell you, I mean, you were one of the big pulls, I think, for this conference. So,
are these all conferees? Are they actually in the room?
There's well, you can see the video in the room, but I think that there are about somewhere between 15 and 20 or 25 locations inside Second Life, and one stream going out to the web. So, in fact, who knows how many streams there are going to Second Life? I think they've multiplied. We certainly made 15 available, but people, I think, are pulling it. Maybe we may get statistics afterwards, but it's certainly, I think, a relatively large audience, and certainly people who are interested in Second Life want to know about it. Sorry, Jeroen, was there something else?
Yeah, I have a question from Lady Latte.
One more time, what was the name?
Lady Latte.
Lady Latte.
Yeah.
Okay, Lady Latte.
And she wants to know what would require to use this in a large landscape. She is an archaeologist, and she works with large landscapes, and she was wondering, what would we take it to use this on a much larger scale?
Could you understand that?
No, I couldn't. Could you repeat the question, Robert? Because I think the microphone is.
I think the microphone. It was she's an architect student, I believe, and
She's an archaeologist.
sorry, archaeologist, and she was asking what would it take to
use it on a large scale. Like
use this on a large scale.
So for a large camera view of an whole.
So a much larger view. So essentially, kind of the technology question that we were talking about. So, what would it take in the sense of time, probably, right, or maybe something else, but
time and resources.
Yep.
It depends. On a large scale, you mean, for example, it would be relatively easy to model, say, an archaeological. I mean, assuming you had the site already measured and so on,
yep.
to model something in Second Life, that's been done, I'm sure.
Yep.
And then the question would be, could we put a camera at the site? How much could we, get?
How big a perspective could you get on it? Yes.
Exactly. And I think that those kinds of things are not difficult, not as difficult as the initial, programming was.
Right.
And I think that it's quite doable. It was just a question of resources and energy and having something, a specific project to work on.
Well, if I can,
I should say,
yes?
Robert, let me give my email address. You have it actually. I'd be happy to pass it on to people at the conference if they want to talk about possible applications or projects. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Well, part of what I really would like to do is to help get you a little bit more exposure, because I think if we can get the funding for it, then in fact maybe the progress can happen a little bit more quickly.
Oh, sure.
That's certainly part of my goal, and I can pass it on. But there's another question. Go ahead. Your name, maybe?
Yes, my name is Ruud. I'm from Holland, of course.
Ruud from Holland.
The most obvious example you always hear is the novel from Werner Vinge, that's Rainbow's End, where he depicts the ubiquitous use of augmented reality in the year 2025. Of course, 2025 is a bit away. My prime interest, and something I speculate a lot about with my friends, is when can we expect a market accessible product in terms of stereoscopic vision, maybe some sort of headset, and something which is easy to use as the Wiimote.
Could you hear that?
So I think I heard most of the question. You're asking when could we expect a product that was easy to use that actually could make augmented reality available to consumers?
Yeah,
is that right?
I think that's it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, and I'm terrible at predicting the future. And the first person to acknowledge that. I think that, like many other technologies, it is partly a question of technological development and mostly a question of marketing, or whether the market will be interested in the technology to push it. So, for example, there have been people working on what is typically considered to be the Ne Plus Ultra of headsets, which is a set that would draw using small low-power lasers, draw images directly on the retina, which sounds dangerous, but they claim that it's that they're very low power and that it's quite safe. It would what would happen is you would be wearing glasses that would have a little electronics behind the earpieces, and then they would feed two small lasers that would be perhaps located somewhere in here, and they would draw on your eye. They would it would allow perfect combinations of what you can see in the world and what the computer can draw, and the technology right now, it exists in black and white. They're moving to color versions, so we're talking about a matter of a few years. On the other hand, the cost is tens of thousands of dollars for one pair right now, but they claim that if it were to be manufactured on consumer scale, that you could do it for hundreds of dollars.
That's Steve Mann, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that Steve Mann at the University of Toronto?
It's no. It's I knew you were going to ask me. I think it's called Intavision. The people who started it were the HIT Lab in Washington, and then and they subsequently moved to New Zealand. They spun off a company which is working on this laser technology. Now, Steve Mann may also be working on something similar. I mean, clearly, this is the wave of the future here. But the question is, are people going to is an entrepreneur going to come along who can make this available? Are people going to buy it? Can we give them enough reason to want to buy it? Can we share, Robert, as you were saying, you had the vision, you got the religion a long time ago, but it's hard sometimes for people to share it until you can find the right application. Yep. What's driving, the headsets that you can buy now, the inexpensive ones, the consumer level, what's driving them is that they're being advertised as, television sets that you can watch in bed. Right? You can put them on, and it's like you're watching TV quietly, and you won't disturb anyone. And that's a market. Yep. Those are totally virtual reality glasses, as it were, because they completely cover your eyes. As far as I know, there are no commercially available augmented reality headsets at the consumer level that exists now. And so the question is, can we generate the kind of interest that would make that possible? So 2025, I don't know, 2015, 2010, it's really more a question of market economics than it is of the technology. The other aspect of it, though, and this may be in this time frame too, 5-10 years, is what's called natural feature tracking. Because right now, as you can see in this image, we have these rather strange little marks on the floor there, and those fiducial marks are necessary for the camera to understand its relationship to the space. But with developments in computer recognition, vision recognition, the possibility is there that you could have the camera just look at a space, remember it, and then be able to know how you're moving your head and how you're moving your eyes based on the changes in the scene that it sees. And then the whole world becomes available for augmented reality. Wow. Very impressive. Then all sorts of applications become available that are kind of tedious now because you'd have to go around sticking fiducial markers on the world. If you didn't have to do that, there's probably other things that immediately become commercially viable.
Sure. In the video that you have right there, the one that we can see in Second Life, are you standing in that lab, or is the lab somewhere else?
I'm in the lab, but I'm actually.
I was just wondering if you stick your hand in that space, would we see your hand?
Sure.
I mean, will we see your hand running all around the avatars? Is that
you can see
is that what it would look like?
Just a sec, I'll do that.
My question was about that too. What would happen if you tilted that Lego block that Robert is sitting on?
The Lego block I'm sitting? Oh, okay. What would happen is that, I mean, if you tilted it in the real world or in the virtual world?
No, if he trips...
Nothing would happen. I would still stay there because there's only because there's a correspondence between the two.
And do you see the little teapot I put in there? That's our little magic teapot. But the problem is, you see that, there it goes. Do you see that that the characters, that the system doesn't know about the teapot. It doesn't know where to put the teapot relative to the avatars.
Right.
And the same with my hand. That's because they weren't modeled.
Yep.
Everything, the balls it knows about, but everything else is fixed. And those are modeled in such a way that that we can record where they are, fix that, lock that down, and then we can do the video so that people can walk behind them.
So in theory it would be possible, but again the technology needs to advance.
The technology needs to advance.
Do you know anybody else, maybe even the last question, because I know you have to go. Do you know of anybody else who's actually working on something as similar to this, or who's come as far as you have? Because I don't know if anybody else specifically, but maybe you do. I mean,
well, I don't know. There are people who have worked on similar applications. I can't quote you, say exact work. My colleague Blair could do that better than I. They have been in various forms, like games, actually, where the idea would be to play a kind of virtual tennis, tabletop tennis. I mean, ping pong, where you would the ball would be virtual, but your paddles and the table would be real.
So something like the Wii, except that you would be able to incorporate any kind of virtual reality rather than just what.
Exactly, and probably when we're talking about killer apps, probably games.
Yep.
Will be the place where this augmented reality technology first becomes commercially viable.
Well, that's amazing. I know you have to go. I'm sure there are even more questions, but I just wanted to thank you very much
Yeah.
It's really
It was a
amazing.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Much appreciated.